There is a feeling that is harder to explain than sadness, harder to bring to someone's attention than anxiety, harder to justify than grief. It doesn't have a dramatic shape. It doesn't come with tears or with the racing thoughts that anxiety produces. It doesn't feel like pain. It doesn't feel like much of anything. It just feels empty. And the specific difficulty of this emptiness is that nothing is very hard to talk about. When you're sad, you can point to a cause. When you're anxious, you can describe what you're afraid of. When you're angry, you can name the thing that made you angry. But when you're empty, there is no cause to point to, no fear to describe, no event to explain. There is just the absence of the feeling that there should be something. You sit in a perfectly fine evening and feel nothing about it. You complete tasks that would normally bring some satisfaction, and they leave no impression. You're with people you genuinely like and feel as though there is a glass wall between you and the experience of being with them. Today, we're looking at 10 normal things people do when they feel empty inside. Behaviors that don't announce themselves as symptoms of emptiness, that look completely ordinary, but that are the specific ways a person navigates a life that has lost its texture. If you've been feeling something like this, if nothing has been your most honest answer to, "How are you?" this video is for you. Not to diagnose, not to alarm, but to name something that is very difficult to name. What is emotional emptiness? Emotional emptiness is not the same as depression, though it can be a feature of it. It is not the same as numbness, though it can feel similar. It is its own specific experience, a persistent background sense that the things that should matter don't quite matter, that the things that should feel like something feel like nothing, that the person moving through the day is somehow not fully connected to the life they are moving through. It can arrive after a loss, not necessarily a dramatic loss, sometimes simply the loss of something that organized your sense of who you were, a relationship, a role, a set of goals, a version of the future you had been walking toward. When those things change or end, what is left is sometimes not grief. Sometimes it is just the absence of the structure that gave everything meaning. It can arrive gradually with no identifiable cause, a slow dimming of the felt sense of life that happens so incrementally that by the time it becomes noticeable, it has been present for quite a while. What it almost never is: nothing. The feeling of nothing is not the absence of anything real. It is a signal, a specific and often overlooked signal that something needs attention. Let's look at what it looks like from the outside. Thing 1. Seeking stimulation that doesn't quite satisfy. You reach for things, not out of genuine desire. Desire requires the felt sense that something will be good, and emptiness has quieted that, but more out of a sense that stimulation might provide something, might produce a feeling, the phone, the food, the next episode, the scroll that continues past anything that would qualify as interesting, the purchase, the plan, the new thing that feels momentarily promising and delivers at best a brief interruption of the nothing before the nothing resumes. This looks from the outside like ordinary modern distraction, and it is often. But there is a specific quality to the seeking that accompanies emptiness, the absence of actual satisfaction at arrival. You reach the thing and it doesn't land. You consume it and it doesn't nourish. The stimulation produces a brief occupation of the space where feeling should be, and then the space is empty again. The reaching continues not because the things are satisfying, but because the alternative, sitting with the emptiness without reaching, is something the person has not yet learned to do. Thing 2, feeling detached, going through the motions without being in them. The day happens, the conversations are had, the meals are eaten, The work is done, and there is, accompanying all of it, a specific quality of being slightly outside the experience rather than inside it. Psychologists call this depersonalization or derealization when it reaches clinical levels. The sense that you're watching yourself from a distance, or that the world around you feels unreal, slightly flat, as though something essential about its texture has been removed. At subclinical levels, at the levels most people who feel empty experience, it is less dramatic than that. Just the sense that the dinner you're having is fine, but you're not quite in it. That the conversation is happening and you are participating, but the participation is slightly automated, slightly going through the motions in a way that the person across from you probably cannot detect. This is one of the most isolating features of emptiness. It is invisible from the outside. The person going through the motions looks just like a person who is present, and the gap between the inside experience and the outside presentation widens, which deepens the emptiness, because the person becomes increasingly aware that their actual experience and their presented experience are different, and that no one knows. Thing 3, craving something but not knowing what. There is a restlessness that accompanies emptiness, a low-grade sense of wanting something without being able to identify what. You open the fridge not because you're hungry, but because something prompted the opening. You pick up your phone not to do anything specific, but because the itch needed a response. The craving is real. The object of the craving is unavailable, not because the right thing hasn't been found yet, but because what is actually being craved is not something that can be consumed or obtained. It is the felt sense of meaning, of connection, of being inside your own life rather than adjacent to it. And because that craving cannot be met by anything available in the immediate environment, the reaching continues without resolution. Each thing tried is inadequate, not because it is the wrong thing, but because no available thing can provide what the emptiness is actually asking for. The restlessness of this, the perpetual low-level reaching for something that never quite arrives, is exhausting in a specific way that is very difficult to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. Thing 4, being easily overwhelmed by small things. The email is slightly rude. The plan changes unexpectedly. The task takes longer than it should, and the response from inside is larger than the situation warrants. Not always expressed, often just felt. A surge of frustration or despair, or the specific flat hopelessness that small obstacles produce when a person is running on empty. The minor friction landing harder than it normally would because the buffer that normally absorbs it is not available. When people feel empty, the emotional reserves that normally provide resilience to daily friction are depleted. Not through any specific crisis, just through the ongoing low-level cost of experiencing life as though it has been drained of something essential. The big things are manageable, often. It is the small things that reveal the depletion, because the small things are where the ordinary reserves get used. This is why people who feel empty sometimes seem, to others, to be overreacting to minor things. They are not overreacting to the minor thing. They are responding accurately to how depleted they are. And the minor thing is simply the occasion on which the depletion becomes visible. Thing 5, withdrawing. Not because you're angry, but because you have nothing to bring. The withdrawal is not about the people. You're not angry with them. You haven't been hurt. There is no conflict, no grievance, no reason for the distance that you could explain to them if they asked. You simply have nothing to bring. Conversation requires a certain amount of investment. The investment of genuine engagement, of caring about what is being talked about, of having something of your own to contribute beyond the minimum required to maintain the appearance of presence. When you're empty, that investment is not available. Not because you don't care about the people. You do. In some abstract way you can still access. But the fuel that would translate the caring into showing up is gone. This withdrawal can look like introversion, like being busy, like needing space. Sometimes those explanations are offered and accepted. What they rarely capture is the specific texture of this withdrawal. It is not that the person needs time alone to recharge. It is that they have been alone in the most important sense for quite a while, alone with the emptiness, and the social energy required to be with others would require resources that are simply not there. Thing 6. Finding old interests. Flat and new things. Failing to generate interest. The things you used to love, the book you would have read in one sitting, the music that used to reliably move something in you, the activity that absorbed you for hours, they are still available. Nothing has removed them. You can still access them. They just don't generate the response they used to. And the new things, the book a friend recommended, the project someone suggested, the hobby someone thought you'd like, don't generate it either. Not because they are wrong for you, but because the capacity for interest itself has been turned down, and nothing available can turn it back up from outside. This is a softer version of the anhedonia that characterizes depression, the reduced capacity for pleasure, and at its subtler levels, it is one of the most disorienting features of emptiness. Because the person experiencing it can see the things that should be interesting. They can remember in an abstract way that these things used to produce a response, and they can access neither the old response nor find a new one. They're standing in front of the music and nothing is happening. Thing 7. Overeating, undereating, or eating past the point of actual hunger. The relationship between emptiness and eating is one of the most consistent findings in the psychology of emotional regulation. When the emotional world goes flat, the physical world becomes one of the few available sources of reliable sensation. Food is immediate. It produces a response that doesn't require emotional investment, doesn't require being in the right state of mind, doesn't require the cooperation of another person. The warmth, the sweetness, the fullness. These are sensations that arrive regardless of whether the emotional channel for feeling things is open. And so the person who feels emotionally empty reaches for food not because they are hungry, but because the eating produces something. A moment of sensation in a landscape of flat, a brief occupation of the space where the inner life should be. This is not weakness. This is a very human attempt to address a real deficit with the most immediately available resource. The deficit is emotional. The resource is physical. The mismatch is part of why it doesn't resolve the emptiness, but also why it is so reliably attempted. Thing 8. Saying, "I don't care," and actually meaning it. There is the performative "I don't care," set as a social move to project indifference to something that actually matters. And then there is the literal version, when you say it, and the honest follow-up is, "No, genuinely, I don't." The decision that someone else has to make, the outcome of the situation, the question of where to eat, what to watch, what to do, the things that the people around you are investing energy in choosing, weighing, caring about. When you're empty, these things genuinely don't produce a preference. Not because you're being difficult or checked out as a social gesture, because the mechanism that generates preferences, the caring enough about outcomes to have a position on them, has gone quiet. This can be mistaken for contentment, someone who is easy, low maintenance, unbothered. And sometimes it is contentment. But there's a specific quality to the not caring that accompanies emptiness. The sense not of "I'm happy with whatever," but of nothing is generating enough signal to warrant having an opinion about it. The difference is not always visible from outside, but the person inside knows which one it is. Thing 9. Feeling disconnected from your own identity, unsure who you are lately. You know the facts of who you are, your name, your history, your relationships, your preferences in the abstract. but the felt sense of being a coherent person with a particular character, particular ways of seeing things, particular things that matter to you, that has become less clear. It is not amnesia. It is more like the specific quality of having been so far from yourself for long enough that the self feels slightly foreign. The things you valued, you can remember valuing, but the valuing itself is not currently accessible. The things that defined you feel like descriptions of someone you used to be rather than someone you currently are. Emptiness has this quality of eroding the sense of self not through any dramatic event, but through the gradual absence of the felt life that the self is built from. When nothing is generating genuine feeling, genuine response, genuine preference. The self that is constituted by those feelings and responses and preferences becomes harder to locate. This is frightening in a specific quiet way. Not the panic of a crisis, but the low-level unease of realizing that you have lost the thread of yourself. The thread is still there. It always is. But you cannot currently feel it in your hand. Thing 10. Going through periods of numbness, alternating with unexpected emotional surges. The emptiness is not always perfectly flat. Sometimes it is interrupted by a piece of music, or a scene in a film, or a small kindness from a stranger, or the specific quality of afternoon light, by a wave of emotion that seems disproportionate to whatever triggered it. The wave is real, it is large, and sometimes overwhelming for a moment, and then it passes, and the flat returns, and the person is left slightly disoriented by the contrast, by the fact that something that small could produce something that large when the large things around them produce nothing. This alternation, numbness and surge, flat and wave, is one of the more confusing features of emotional emptiness, because it suggests that the emotional capacity is still present. The feelings are still there. Something is still capable of being moved. But the ordinary things that should generate feeling don't, and the unexpected small things sometimes produce more than expected. What this tells us, the emptiness is not the permanent condition. It is a state, a specific configuration of the emotional system that is producing a particular kind of experience. And states change, not on demand, not through willpower, not by trying harder, but through the slow and patient process of attention, of care, of giving the inner life the resources it has been running without. 10 things, each of them ordinary, each of them carrying underneath the ordinary surface the specific texture of a person who is living in a life that has lost some of its felt meaning. I want to say something about this before we close, because it is easy to hear a list like this and feel worse rather than better. The emptiness is not a verdict. It is not evidence that something is permanently wrong with you, that you are broken in a way that can't be addressed, that the flatness you're experiencing is just who you are now. It is a signal, a specific, often overlooked, deeply important signal that something in the way you are living, or something you have been carrying for a long time without attending to it, needs some attention. The things on this list are what people do to navigate the emptiness without addressing it. They are not the problem. They are the very human and very understandable response to a problem that hasn't yet been named. You're naming it now. And naming it, clearly without minimizing, without explaining it away, is the beginning of being able to do something with it. If the emptiness has been present for a long time, if it has been a persistent background condition rather than a passing phase, please consider talking to someone. Not because you are in crisis, but because you deserve more than managing the flat. You deserve to feel your life, and that is something that can be worked toward. If this video named something, share it with someone who might be in the same quiet place without a language for it. Take care of yourself. We'll see you in the next one.